Welcome. My name is Julie West, and I'm our Content Marketing Manager here at ArcXP. I'm so excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Inside the Lab, how ArcXP's product teams are building what's next in AI, personalization, and editorial innovation. Before we start, I'd like to go through a couple of housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see blue-green widgets that allow you to customize your viewing options. The primary widget on your screen are also movable, so feel free to adjust your screen to your preferences. We are recording today's session, and you'll receive an on-demand version after the webinar. If you're having any trouble seeing or hearing the presentation at any time, just refresh your screen and log back in. Also, we want to hear from you and have this be as interactive a conversation as possible. So please take advantage of our Q&A tool. We can see your questions as they come in, and we definitely want to get them answered during our Q&A portion. And with that, we're ready to get started. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Joe Croney, ArcXP's Chief Technology Officer. So Joe, I'll go ahead and kick things off to you.
Thank you for the intro, Julie. Really happy we're together again for another ArcXP webinar series. We heard in the last one of these that you wanted to know a little bit more about what's happening behind the scenes, how our engineering teams are innovating, how we're thinking about matching business strategy up to the actual roadmap and bringing that to all of the market. And so today we're going to do an inside the lab look. Super excited for this today. I'm joined by Joey and Mike, two of our key leaders within our product engineering teams. So I want to welcome them to the call as we go inside the lab at ArcXP and focus really on two areas of innovation. One around how we're using AI to drive new consumer experiences, a new interaction model, and then around how we're using hyper-personalization to draw in those audiences. So welcome, Joey and Mike.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.
Hey. Yeah, excited to be here. We got a lot of great stuff for you all today.
And our goal is to be conversational today. As Julie mentioned, we're going to be watching the questions as they come in, and we want to bring as much texture as we can to the challenges we're seeing day by day in our engineering teams, our product teams, as we try to harness the potential of AI. And actually, I'm going to start from a place, not at the technical layer, but more about our strategy. One of the things we've been talking a lot about at ArcXP is that we're really two sides of the same coin with the Washington Post. And I'm excited today we're actually going to be highlighting some of the innovations that began at the Washington Post in their B2C business and bringing those into ArcXP. And so that's kind of where we come to this call with, where every day we show up believing in the power of storytelling to change the world and working with our partners across the Washington Post and the thousands of sites that run on ArcXP to solve some of the challenges that we think are necessary to build that future of media together. And a lot of the conversation you've heard me talk about, we've met at conferences, I love being with customers. We know that everyone in the industry really is facing these three key pillar challenges. One, where direct traffic is declining. Google Zero has been in the mix. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple weeks' time at ArcConnect. We've been happy to see that it hasn't gone to zero immediately. There's a little bit more time than expected, but it's a key concern. AI is not driving the visitors and engagement that we'd like. When someone gets an answer from an AI platform, they often don't come to us to see the source of that answer. And then finally, a lot of the conversation today will be about that news UX. What does the audience want? What do they expect as they come and look for new information, engaging stories? What's the format, the tone, the modality, the interaction model that's going to engage them? And that's where we really are focused on what we call three phases of audience. Audience 1.0 is where many media companies started. The days of broadcast for television, the days of having a paper delivered to your door, where it really was a passive consumer that just got the content in one shot. It was one size fits all, not personalized, controlled by media newsrooms, and really we were seeking for attention. We've been in a journey with Web 2.0 and 3.0 where there's more interaction required. People are used to SaaS applications, a little bit more personalization. And so we see this in some of the homepages our customers use, but it's far short of Audience 3.0. And our bet is that Audience 3.0 is what the future of media demands, and that's where the audience wants to be co-creators, have predictive, immersive, and adaptive experiences, be able to own some of the content we're doing. And so our takeaway has been, as we've talked to the market, that many of the industry is still an Audience 1.0, that the focus of our storytellers, the focus of our experiences is in that first realm, even though we know consumers have moved to Audience 3.0, especially if you look at the younger demographics who are spending their time on social platforms, on TikTok, on blogs, on all the podcasts that are much more engaging in two-way. So I wanted to take a break and actually poll the audience here. Many of you took time out to be with us today. So in that spirit of interactivity, we've got a quick poll I'm going to show here to say, where are you today with your operations? When you talk about with your team, your editorial teams, are they envisioning Audience 1.0 as the focus, somewhere in between an Audience 2.0, or really immersed yourself in this Audio 3.0 concept? So if you wouldn't mind just clicking on your screen and selecting either A, B, or C, I'll give you a moment to get that submitted, and then we'll see where the audience here today feels they are with the focus of your business. And Julie, can you confirm for me just that the poll is active and the attendees are able to contribute?
Yes, the poll is active.
All right, I see them coming in. All right, I know it's just getting started here. We got about 30% of people. We'll give it a couple more seconds and see where the quick take is for the audience today. All right, going once, twice, 3 times a charm. All right, so it looks like in terms of this group, no one feels they've made it to Audience 3.0. And really the spread is we've had a lot of good movement to Audience 2.0 to that center band. And I think to be honest, that's what we see within the Washington Post newsroom as well. We're doing a lot to reinvent news and shift to this new market. If we don't get there, the audience is drying up. And so the imperative for our business is there to get that Audience 3.0. We think it's possible to transform media with AI. We've talked about 3 stages of this, where we begin with workflow with AI enhancements, go to automation and agentic workflows, and this last experience layer. And kind of behind the scenes in the lab, as it turns out, Ark and Joey and Mike and I, our teams have been focused on number 1. We started with that workflow. In the same moment, the Post, with their consumer experience, went straight to number 3 and built that Ask the Post experience. And in between now, we see filling out this automation. So I'm actually really excited that today we're going to be talking about this experience layer. We've shared a lot of innovation about AI tools. They are speeding up newsrooms. We see the adoption, and where we're going to be moving to really is all this experience layer. And Mike and Joey, I'm kind of interested in your take as you've helped your teams understand this model of kind of 3 frames for AI. We've obviously had to learn a lot the last couple of years, lots of excitement, lots of hype, lots of real product. Joey, how's your team reacted to these different phases, especially as you get to the consumer experience?
I mean, it's a great question that, we really established early on, which I've spoken about a lot, of like establishing our kind of ethical framework philosophy around AI, to not just kind of chase the hype and realize, we're focused on media and journalism, and that it was going to be a long ride. And so starting with things that we thought could have the maximum amount of value around workflow, like more kind of simple things to really understand the use cases, almost warm people up to it, was very helpful in framing like our kind of stacking vision of capabilities, knowing that we get to experiences and we wanted really hardened AI features like prompts, vectors, and the multimodal aspects. So we weren't kind of jumping back and having to kind of retool everything that has worked out pretty well.
In the last webinar, we talked a lot about real agents, real action, kind of that middle phase. I think that journey has been super important to get to the consumer side. Mike, you're head of our content platform of Ark, those core services. What have been the challenges for your team as you've thought about what that core infrastructure needs to do to be innovative in using AI throughout?
It's good. It's interesting, Joe. I mean, obviously the content platform at Ark has a very long history, both within the Washington Post and then Ark. And we've focused a lot on delivering a lot of content at scale with configurability, but it was all done during the kind of curated editorial process. As we've started to move forward and looking at how to use the kinds of intelligence assets that Joey's team has been building out, I think the most surprising thing for us is how many of the teams at Ark have to be involved in that to get the experience that we want, right? We start by saying, well, we want the experience to show the following recommendation options to the end users. And we say, okay, so now we need user information. We need content to power that user information. You start working your way back. It's like the old 5 whys exercise. And I think the most interesting part of this is it's created this culture of all of our teams working together in a way that we haven't done a lot of in the past. And now with our work with the Post, it's even bigger than that. And with some of the beta partners we've been talking with, we've been learning a lot more about the kind of holistic view of the kind of Audience 3.0 experience. And it's been a really exciting kind of journey and set of conversations we're now having with customers.
And that's somewhat unexpected. I think a lot of the conversation about AI was that AI was going to do the lifting for us, that some of us wondered, what's the role going to be for us humans building the software, telling the stories? And I hear you sharing, look, it actually brought us together as we needed to innovate. So, really thank you for sharing that, Mike. And in terms of that journey, we are excited to see that many newsrooms have put AI budgets at the forefront, thinking about how they can use it for editorial efficiency. We're hearing from people using our workflow tools a big jump in empowerment of those journalists, not a replacement story, but one where we can tell better stories. And then finally, really freeing up that time that was consumed by stuff that wasn't making the story any better, that wasn't bringing joy to the lives of our journalists, and really using AI as an assistant there. So we see a lot of that first step really having been completed. And as we've thought about ArcXP on our 3 goals of helping our customers innovate rapidly, own your audience, and have independent revenue, we're very excited to see what Joey's done to really bring ArcXP intelligence around that core into the CMS with Mike and into these new workflows. So with that said, I think we're going to switch into the real meat of the conversation with Joey speaking about how that ArcXP intelligence is lighting up for a new experience that we believe can really help everyone on this call and in the industry see a pattern for better owning our audience. A thing that's so important today is we can't really allow our audience to be owned off platform because we know they're not going to share those audiences back with us. So Joey, would you, we'll jump into your section here.
Okay. So we're going to talk about Ask the News, which probably a lot of you are familiar with Ask the Post, which is a phenomenal feature for the Washington Post that is centered around this concept of that's called a RAG. So I realize some people may be familiar with that, not familiar, so I want to do kind of a little bit of a primer before we get into the actual Ask the News product. So what is a RAG? A RAG is stands for real-time augmented generation. So when you're, say, using a prompt, like using ChatGPT or Arc Intelligence, Claude, whatever, and you type something in, say, do this, it's leveraging the large language model and maybe some tooling depending on what you're using, but it's essentially kind of a zero-shot scenario, meaning it's like figure out the tokens for the response, respond. It's very good at, like say summarizing things or writing something. But when you want to get into real valuable use cases, you need to augment that in some way. And sometimes that's like adding a document, giving it additional context, but there's limitations to that. So you can augment the responses by giving the LLM essentially more data, but that gets complicated. And I'm not going to go into every single aspect of it, but essentially it's a searchable knowledge repository. Like a kind of example I'll use is it's like, chatting with a reporter in your newsroom that's worked at a newspaper since its existence, that knows every story published, what videos are done, like when you've quoted sources, et cetera. That doesn't really exist. I mean, there's some reporters that definitely have that level of knowledge, but it can't be as maybe up to date or as real time. So when we first started with the workflow assistance, we started with kind of the base layers of Arc Intelligence, of prompting, prompt management, settings, all of that. Then developed our vector database solution, which you can see today. with content recommendations than Composer. So recommending related links, recommend a photo or a video. And that's really the basis of RAG, is having a strong vector database and then having kind of chunks of that content. So you have like a full document, but then you also have contextual chunking, or kind of summaries or smaller portions of a story or photo or video, so that you can retrieve it quickly and find relevant information. And the asks products are centered around just that, asking questions. So then you have aspects of it like, what questions can this story answer? And then there's nuance to those questions. So then you re-rank results. So you do a search, and then you rank which kind of pieces of content could best answer the question. Then the LLM kind of crunches that all down, verifies it, and then can respond. What this really opens up is a whole new experience for your readers, your viewers, your consumers, to engage more deeply with your content. And there's some fascinating data behind this that we hope to share in the coming months as we're closer to Ask the News coming out, of how that shifts people's reading habits. And what I found really fascinating is, what you maybe feature on the homepage or share out on social, that's determining a reader experience to a certain extent. But when the human is really in control and looking for individual pieces of information, maybe they go to a homepage or kind of come in sideways, but you've started to kind of control that experience. With Ask, you can search or ask for anything you want, which may produce content that was never featured on the homepage or is in a completely different category that they don't normally read. And you start to see that. What that unlocks is kind of the serendipity aspect. And then it starts to tie into things like subscriptions to really show your breadth of coverage. And then also behind it is the data that we'll be sharing for customers who use Ask the News, is kind of almost a business intelligence aspect. What are questions that were asked that you didn't have a response for? Either you didn't have that content, or it's just not something totally in your coverage area, and you can start to see those patterns. So let's get into really how the RAG works.
Hey, Joey, I'm going to jump in with a quick question and remind our audience too that actually I got your video. I'll come in after that.
Okay, cool. So we already have the kind of top portion of this diagram where, because RAG's really a pipeline, so we're automatically creating these vectorized embeddings to make them searchable to retrieve content. And where really Ask the News it gets focused on media, or a lot of these capabilities, which we kind of quick, but I'll come back to, are like controls of like what content should be included or excluded, guardrails, so it doesn't make mistakes. So when a user asks a question, we actually will enhance that query or block it if it's a malicious query. Apply those content filters, like say don't include the opinion section, re-rank, verify the answer, and if there's no answer, at least recommend some loosely related semantic search results, because we want to bias toward accuracy. So there's no hallucination or making things up, so that it really adheres to our philosophy around, it's like replaying. Okay, that's fine. So that what's generated isn't like, totally misleading. It would be focused on your content that you control. So it's a kind of higher order of value than say just using Google or ChatGPT with web search on, that it's really focused on your experience, your sources. And then you can configure kind of these guardrails, how to respond, the tone, length, what's included. And we're starting with stories, with text, but in a little bit, I'll show some enhancements to that, where we'll also be bringing in photo and video. So like a photo that may really convey the answer, because this is a more visual answer. And then video, where it can actually use transcripts from our vector video engine to even jump to like a distinct time code and play a clip that helps with that answer. I'll pause there. Joe, if you had a question.
I think when we're thinking about the RAG, the real-time augmented generation, really a mouthful of a technology. The last thing you had there was talking about the insights where you might be able to pull something out of the archive that would be interesting that you might not have otherwise. I think a lot of our news organizations are full of storytellers that have kind of a mental model of what stories might relate, but as our organizations and customers have such huge archives spanning not just years, but perhaps decades, it feels like vectors have the potential to really bring new value, new life to stories that might have been forgotten and not top of mind in our teams. How do you think about that intersection of this technology that has really an infinite ability to look through an archive with that story of the day and presenting that to the consumer?
Oh, that's a great question, because we see this as like there's multiple uses of this product. I mean, the say the Ask the Post experience and the first iteration of Ask the News is really biased towards recency, although it does do dual time search. So it's looking for the most recent, most relevant information, but we'll also search back to a certain extent, so it can answer the most up-to-date news. But we also see it as an archive application so that you can kind of spread that data out to remove that maybe more recency bias. And we also see it as with an internal use case that is you kind of take out some of the more public guardrails to be like just really, really good search within your content. Like you're writing a story and say, you could ask, how many times have I quoted this source in other stories, or how have other people's quoted them, and like get down to other information to help you with your story, which is not too dissimilar from readers who are like, oh, there's this recent story. Well, I remember something like similar to that from like 5 years ago, and then ask a question there. And so now you're like kind of in this kind of rabbit hole almost in a good way. That's not like an echo chamber or algorithmic. It's almost like Wikipedia, but it's your content, real up-to-date news. So I definitely see value in archives. I think that's where we start to really show the breadth of customers' coverage.
And a somewhat related question coming in from the audience, one of the exciting things has been to see customers innovate with these same technologies, experiment with their own vector data stores. How do you see the extensibility play? If someone has built their own vector database and trained it on their archive, is that something that they could connect to Arc?
Yes, so we do see customers starting to really play in the space, get more advanced. Right now, we don't have like it's like total kind of federated integrations, but we do see that coming, where you want to ingest content a different way, and even different types of content. And I see this question about like, do we need to have a knowledge graph or any sort of advanced metadata? And really the answer is no. And this is why I think Arc was really set up for the AI kind of renaissance, if you will, is that we have that. I mean, we already do some enhancements during the vector process, especially for photo and video, where you don't have to worry about that. Now, if you wanted to build a RAG yourself, you would have to do all of that and build in all these kind of pieces. And I had one of our colleagues ask this morning, what's stopping, say, a customer from using the Arc Intelligence SDK with semantic search and building their own RAG? And I said, nothing. It's just that's like 1/16 of a RAG is semantic search. And then there's all these other pieces around it. And that's what we're trying to provide is like, the core of it, and then making it more extensible with a lot of these capabilities, controls to really. So we'll go to the next thing, the next video. I've shown a very early rough demo. Ask the News, as I've been alluding to, is a RAG. And this experience is not what the real consumer experience will look like. This is a very quick kind of spun up demo to start showing the work that's going on behind the scenes within the back end. So one, it will be multi-site, or can be, or single site, or even down to single section. And then we'll have similar features to Ask the Post of like automatically recommending questions based on real-time up-to-date news. And that could be in a variety of ways and would be handled during the kind of publishing process. We can store different questions and then you can ask questions. And I'll show this kind of starter demo. Start talking about a couple other things coming. So these recommended questions kind of help with, maybe what you want to ask, since it's a more intent-based experience. And you can use those, or you can just ask your own question, and it can search across all sites or a single site, and it creates that summary of the answer, but then also cites the content that was used to achieve that answer. And so you can still go in and read the full story. If it doesn't have an exact answer, it can still show kind of loosely related results, but not try to force an answer. So there's still, content to discover. Then, as I mentioned, we're moving to multimodal with a photo and video and also audio, so that, we can get kind of a real, almost like organic living article type experience, only it's really focused on that user. And I lost my mouse. I mentioned with video, we have this feature internally that we've been proving out that is related to video vectors that we also want to bring here, which is tentatively called Ask My Video. This we see as an internal feature coming, but also as another augmentation in Ask the News, which I'll show a brief demo of. And this video that you're seeing with Shaq is from a result of searching for cooking and basketball. So is Shaq doing a cooking show? So you can ask things like, what is this video about? Does Shaq make any jokes in this video? And then use the actual transcript to time codes and answer that with the time code. So how this will blend with Ask the News after the first iteration is when you're asking a question, if there's relevant video, it can do the same thing. So it can give you a text summary response, but also show videos that are keyed to that time code that can answer that question. So not only deepening engagement, say, on the story level, but also the video level and bringing them together. And also this last piece is, this is focused on like a standalone experience, right? So you come in and ask a question. We see this spreading across all experiences, up to our customers, where you can also kind of have like a mini rag on the article level. So then you can just ask questions about that exact article, which can help with your news knowledge, finding other related content, and kind of puts you in control of your journey. And to start wrapping up, what's next is we are building out really the full backend and moving towards a kind of private internal beta with customers at the very beginning of next year to kind of test within the admin, verify, your filtering's right and it's answering how you want it to, while we're creating that true consumer front-end experience. And a lot of the capabilities is coming with it will be kind of, we already have is like content prep, but then this testing, so you can kind of test different prompts and query blocking, filtering different content you want to include, exclude, to make sure it's really right before we just put it out on the public internet.
Very cool, Joey. And I think this is a great example of that innovation from the post side coming to Arc, and then the hard lift that's required to take a capability that was honed for one site and brand and putting it into the ARC platform and offering it to scale and to be flexible and meet the needs of thousands of sites around the world. On that angle, I know you spent a lot of time with Sam Hahn at the Post side and the data science behind Ask the Post. When you think about Ask the News, I believe we're really trying to leverage the full ARC intelligence platform, the ability to leverage a bunch of models behind the scenes of the RAG. Tell me a little bit more about that journey of taking something that was existing first in the WashingtonPost.com site and reimagining it for a much broader audience.
Oh, great question. And yeah, first shout out to Sam Hahn, his team. I've known Sam for a very long time, from back when I was running product for the Post, and that is such a benefit to us and unique, where we have kind of this flywheel of innovation, incubation, can learn from them. And we are building Ask the News in tandem with them. So like when we get to something kind of like difficult, we can say, wait, how do you guys do this? And they're like, oh, here's how we did it. That would probably have taken us months to maybe figure out on our own, but they already spent those, weeks and months figuring it out. So we can really benefit from that. And phenomenal team of engineers and product folks that are really helping us out. So, how I really see it is like ARC Intelligence, we were building these kind of foundational blocks to be ready for this. So like, you need to modify prompts just for the Ask experience. We already have that with prompt management, and then we can isolate it to that. The ability to switch between different models. Again, we already have that. Some models may perform better in a RAG experience for different content or different languages or, different use cases overall. And we have that flexibility. And the monitoring and observability and guardrails and all these things that are critically important to a RAG use case, especially when it is in a public capacity. Again, we'd already have that. We really not almost fully as needed internally, because journalist isn't going to be operating maybe like a normal news consumer, but with all that preparation is really helping us accelerate this development to focus on the core RAG experience to make it as good as possible.
So really working with Sam and his team, you could accelerate getting to this point to bring it to ARC's customers. That inside look inside the lab, can you share a nugget with the audience of maybe one of the hard lessons that the Washington Post went through first that you don't have to repeat and our customers don't either, because we're able to build that right into this product? Oh
yeah, so a couple quick things. So even just some of the underlying architecture of how vectors are stored and chunked. We went through that as well for recommendations, but there's actually even an upgrade to that we learned from them to really improve responses, both for speed and performance and just accuracy. And that's another kind of level of how you do the embeddings and chunking. It took them a while of a lot of iterations that we now really basically have out of the box. And then the other is a vast collection of questions that have been asked and what those catches are. Like one we reuse as an example all the time is people asking, who is the president? And then you have to ask yourself, well, of what country? And like, we're assuming US. That's somewhat easier for the Post because they can maybe assume that. But then it's like, wait, president of what? The country or a company or what? And you kind of have to enhance that to figure that out. And early on, Ask the Post would sometimes make a mistake. And even when Trump would become president, would still think it was Biden, because it has all this coverage of the time when Biden was president, and some confusion because Trump had been president before. And so you have to write all these kind of, catch cases that are flexible and not just like a big conditional, like if question is this, do this. And they've really honed and perfected that now we can benefit from, which is kind of a little piece in the middle that is agentic RAG. So being able to do things in parallel, verify answers. And then people will ask things like, what are today's top stories? And then that's a different layer. So we've gotten all that great feedback of, their experience and how people are using it to further improve our Ask the News product.
Thanks for sharing that. And I know there's lots of people on this call, and as we've demoed, asked the news to customers, excitement will be about these beta programs. I think people should take a look at our newsletters, our upcoming product roadmap for how they'd get involved. Is that the best next step?
Yes, and we were actually talking with our sales team this morning, and our goal is right before Thanksgiving, starting to share out a lot more information behind this, some documentation of like all the capabilities that it will have, how you would set it up to start even before we get the beta out, getting some feedback and seeing what the questions are. So look out for that soon in the next few weeks that we can share with everyone. Thank
you, Joey. I think switching gears, Mike, you have some exciting stuff to share that goes beyond kind of an interactive consumer experience to more that hyper-personalization world. When you think about what we're doing for you, I'd love for you to share with everyone on the call today kind of the backstory of how we've built this and what we're hoping to do for our customers. Welcome, Mike.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. And I think, like everybody, we're very excited about the work that Joey's team has been doing. Arc Intelligence, both the initial work with the Gen AI models and then into Vector, and now into the Ask the News. Those experiences right now are gravitating towards a workflow that's kind of like the old pull versus push model, right? So they're great for someone who's really interacting with it. But there's still a large part of the newsroom experience, which is a push metaphor, right? So we want to be able to drive content to the homepage, to section pages, to different areas of the news experience. And I think that's where the interesting transition is for the For You idea. So obviously recommendations aren't a new thing, right? People have been doing content recommendations for more than a decade now, right? Or several decades, depending on the organization. What's different now is the ability to use vectors that you're already generating for RAGs, for things like what Joey's doing, for other sorts of analysis. It gives you a very different take on what you're able to do with recommendations, is one part of this. And then the other part is the idea that recommendations have kind of evolved now. The readers in the world are more discriminating. And while some of them want an algorithmic solution, some of them still want editorial opinions, and they want, and all of us as news organizations want to be able to choose the degree to which we do that. And I think those mega trends are the ones that have led to ARC kind of revisioning what we want to try to do with recommendations. And that's this For You product. So we're a little bit further out than the Ask the News roadmap. We're still in the visioning process and building out a lot of the infrastructure to do this. So I will state up front that a lot of what you're going to see are our concept work, not working pieces. So I want to be able to show you what we're doing and what we're talking about and what we're working on the pieces to build. So the experience that we're trying to deliver and the kind of user journey is one where you start at the top, where we want to enable the editorial teams at your news organizations to be able to configure how recommendation happens in a much more configurable basis. It shouldn't require development. It shouldn't require coding. You should be able to do some toggles and be able to do testing of new recommendation concepts. Adapt your recommendations and then drive those through the rest of the workflow. Your authors should be able to have some level of influence, whether it's through tagging or feedback into the story creation process. We will leverage the vectors that are being made for other purposes. That will then drive the recommendation engine. And that recommendation engine actually has to handle all the processes, not just for registered users, but you want to be able to use the information for anonymous users to be able to use implicit signals, geography, other information about their browsers, time of day, things like that, so that even though it's adapting, your anonymous users are getting the benefit of some of this. Obviously, the strongest deliverable for recommendations are for registered users. I'm going to use the word registered. It could be tracked users, it could be registered users, it could be subscribers. As long as we can identify the individual, you're able to drive that kind of very real hyper-personalized experience. Again, there are a lot of new innovation in how this can happen. It used to be that people were doing SIMs, they were doing collaborative filtering, things like that. Now with vector technology, you can do more advanced concepts like the two-tower model, where you're basically looking at the content vector, you're looking at the user's engaged stories and the vectors of those, and you're basically doing a vector union of the two, which you can do really fast. So there are a lot of these areas where we're trying to jump to the next generation of recommendation technology in the For You platform. And then obviously at the tail end of that, we have to let you do analysis of the recommendation program and choose what's working. This entire wheel, the big goal with what we're building is a wheel that can keep turning as fast as you need to experiment. So that's the first kind of overall vision of where we're going. Obviously, since it's Arc, we are going to let you extend it here on CDP, and we want to let you do other sorts of integrations. So why? What's interesting is Reuters, the digital news report, just like in the last month, asked people about what are readers and news organizations, are they doing with AI? What are they doing with recommendations? And it's interesting, while there are a lot of information about different kind of cutting edge AI features, one of the big things on the top of both readers and news organizations lists is we want to customize the homepage. We want to improve our recommendations. We want to do better alerting. So this feature, while not always the top one on everybody's list, is kind of low core for their personalization strategy, their hyper personalization strategy. So let me try to talk you through a day in the life. So the idea is that your content admins, whether they're your site managers, whether they're section managers, people that are responsible for parts of the organization, parts of your digital experience, are going to log into a new tool in Arc. And they're basically going to say, hey, I want to come up with different recommendation profiles. Certain areas I want to test popularity, I want to test a similarity model, I might want to test a two-tower model. Then they're going to work with the authors to write content, and then the vector embeddings are going to get generated. Now, one of the big things here with Arc is it's the same embeddings, right? So as some of you may know, generating and running vector search, it can get to be expensive. It also can be quite variable. So you want to make sure that if you're doing work on adding or removing things from your vector embeds, that you have consistency. Like you don't want your For You feature from one provider to do one kind of recommendation or content analysis, and then your search technology to do a different kind of analysis, because you'll start getting really weird systems where if you search, you find it, but you won't get it if you get it recommended to you, right? So there's an advantage to using the same embeddings, both from a cost standpoint and a consistency standpoint. Once the content's generated, the next step for your internal team is being able to add placements. So you're going to start putting blocks on your site that pull from these profiles, and those placements will have their own rules and their own attributes. Obviously, users can also be tagged by the stuff that they're looking at. So again, you do your dashboard, you do your profiles, which are basically what rules engines do you want to use. Then you define your placements on your site. Then you can actually look at what candidate stories are being generated. Now, your candidate stories are really your editorial process and recommendation. You can decide how far back your stories are going to go. You may want to be able to tag stories in or out. We're integrating with the IAB taxonomy so that you could leverage the ability to auto tag things like sensitive topics. And then at the end of that, you've got this infrastructure built for recommendations. So now the anonymous visitors come in to one of the sites that are powering us. We're going to look for the cookie first. Obviously, if we don't have one, we'll make one. We've got access to all of the information from Akamai, which is pretty detailed geo information from the CDN. We then start streaming clickstream analytics to our new analytics repository. Obviously, you can continue to send it to your own. We can do CDP integration. As a lot of you know, that's a kind of built-in capability of Arc Identity. But that clickstream data then will get fed in for anonymous users. To at its most basic level, we could do popularity. But it's not just plain popularity. We can actually do popularity by geo because we have the information. We can do popularity with the candidate story overlay that I showed you before. But now the neat part is we're going to be building this new hyper-efficient system for delivering this per session, and we'll be able to start removing the stories in that user's visit. So it's not full personalization, but as they interact with your digital experiences, you'll be able to tag it and at scale start filtering out stories they've already read. So they go to a story, they come back, and now the top story that they clicked on is removed from their list. So even anonymous users you could start delivering value to. Then what happens when they come back again? Now we've cookied them. We're going to, again, pick up their cookie. Now we've got a local history that we're syncing to the server. We know that since their last visit, our system has chewed through the users' stories of what they engaged in and what vectors that means. And we've compared that vector with your candidate stories. And now we can put a For You block on the page. That block is going to be more personalized. And again, you can brand it however you want. But the idea is that not only can you use that information on For You, you can use it for ad blocks, and you can push it to other systems, like you can push the IAB tags out to other systems. But again, for registered users where they've actively registered, now we can start doing explicit data, right? So now the user comes to the site, we can use the information from what they had engaged in to drive a dynamic paywall with content in it that's tailored to the things that they've been interested in. So not only can we drive the paywall, once they log in, we've got their My News page marketed however we want in a couple of different places. And the For You page is more accurate. The ad blocks are still tailored. But when they click on My News, we now have the capability. And as you've seen, we're rolling out parts of this already. We've rolled out the ability to do bookmarks and stuff with the identity platform already as a kind of early precursor to this. But the idea is that on your My News page, you can have your recommended news, you can have saved stories and bookmarking, and you can have a full reading history that's in here that allows users to save, share, block, less like this, more like this, as well as the ability to favorite authors, topics, and other things. So we're trying to provide the building blocks that you can use to drive different kinds of personalized experiences. At the tail end of that, like I said, ARC hasn't been a big analytics provider. That is still not going to be, we're not going to go out and become Tableau or something like that. But we are going to have the core reports necessary for you to tailor your recommendations experience, compare to a baseline. Probably not full A/B testing, but we'll integrate to those kinds of tools. But comparison to baseline is an important one, so that you could say, hey, here's my core recommendation model. I'm doing an experiment. Are we doing better than that? And are we doing better than that in different segments, right? So not only do you want to filter by segment, you want to filter by different kinds of areas. So what does that mean for everybody? Well, the tail end of the story is we're getting ready to roll out the data capture, which is the ARC Analytics and popularity system in early Q1. And we're working with a couple of beta partners already on talking through what that'll mean. After that, the next step after that is implementing the new edge rendering system that will provide these hyper-personalized recommendation feeds, both for anonymous and registered users. And we'll be adding our collaborative recommendation model. And then after that, we are going to be adding the two-tower vector model that I mentioned. So that's where we are with For You and where we're headed. Move on. Joe?
Joe, I believe you're still muted. Oh.
All right. One more time, Joe? not coming through. All right, I'll play the quick. Hey Joe, if you can help me out, I'll channel my inner Joe, and I'll say probably the best guess would be, what have we learned from our work with customers in the post? Would probably be the first one, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, well, what do you mean, like just working with the post in general, or?
Well, I guess I'm saying that I think that most of the big questions about our lab work has been, what have we done with the Washington Post? So I know back in the day, you had been part of a team that helped work on Clavis. A lot of our customers experimented with the first Clavis model. And I think what's interesting now that we're learning in working with the people at the current team at the Post, and having people like Joey around and several other members of our team who used to work on Clavis, is, the ground for recommendation is changing. The models, the old kind of neural networky models that were the rage back when recommendation happened, 10 years ago, and even were built out in huge AWS technologies like Personalize, all of those technologies are getting stair-stepped right now, right? It's just like NLP turning into GPT, or NLP turning into Google, turning into GPT. We're seeing the same thing happen. And the Post has experimented with a lot of these models. They have an amazing infrastructure and team focused on recommendations. And we really are seeing a difference in the new models, which is why ARC is now looking at how can we make the building blocks to let our customers be able to build those kinds of solutions.
Mike, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah,
So you definitely, that was the angle, the connection I was thinking of. But like kind of the next order question would be, the Post obviously there's a lot of experience, a big data science team where they've worked with recommendations and these different models. You're collaborating, thinking about bringing those in ARC. My assumption is what works for the Post isn't going to work for every customer around the world. So can you share a little bit about maybe what the metrics were that you looked at for how a customer might choose between popularity versus a vector recommendation, and how you think about the technical challenge of taking the learnings from that post-consumer audience and offering it in a platform that's designed for a much wider set of audiences around the world?
Sure.
Right.
Well, I mean, the first thing is we've had amazing conversations with the Post team, and as you said, they've been solving for one point on kind of the spectrum between extreme personalization, a rapidly moving content base, because the Washington Post publishes a lot of content very frequently for its audience, and a cost structure where they're doing different kinds of things. Some of the ARC customers are at different points on that spectrum. So one of the things that we've really tried to do with the ARC for You infrastructure is learn from what we saw with Clavis, and build a system with a low core focus on anonymous users, generating some value, and performance, which is performance and cost. We want to be able to deliver a lot of value right off the bat. And the cold start problem in personalization is a challenge, right? So we wanted to be able to have a very clear entry value, and then allow configuration based on both content curation and model selection, and allow our customers to be able to select different places. You should be able to say, we're going to try recommendations this way in our newsletter, and this way on our website, and this way in our app, so you can learn what kinds of recommendations resonate with your audience. And that's really where we've tried to focus our effort, is honestly a rather discrete set of customization planes within the solution. So on this area, you can do customization, and then on the experience layer, you can do customization. But then the rest of it, you can leverage the building blocks to not have to worry about all of the pieces.
And Joey, a question for you, and if anyone in the audience has some questions, please bring them in. I know Julie's got some closing ones queued up for us, but I'm wondering, do you see an intersection between the innovation you're doing with Ask the News and with For You? Are those products going to end up coming together and perhaps enhancing each other?
Oh, it read my mind. I was almost got into it for my portion, but I didn't want to like steal too much Mike's thunder. But it's a good callback, as we've already been trying not to get too far, too ahead of ourselves. But and I know the post is really looking at this as well, um, is having at least the bare minimum of personalized questions to ask, like based on reading history, questions you've asked in the past. To be a little bit more tailored to you. And then also personalizing kind of how the output is displayed. So, if they're a video heavy user, like bias more to the kind of ask video results. So it feels like even just the experience itself, without making it like totally a departure, that there's known aspects to it. And also like types of questions you're asking, capturing that data for personalization, because as I mentioned before with how it really, provides some serendipity and discovery, is it may get readers interested in something that we don't see in your more common kind of pathing and in the main personalization model. So we see huge overlaps there to make that experience as like for me as possible.
Very cool. I know you've talked about as AI kind of infuses across all of our products, it comes together. And so I'm excited not only to see these products get to our customers, hear their feedback, but also the evolution as we go through that audience 3.0. Julie, I think we're coming to a close here. Do you have some questions for us?
I do. So we have a few that came in, but please feel free to keep submitting if you have any questions in the Q&A box. But our first question is, before I RAG my content, do I need to have a knowledge graph or any sort of advanced metadata to have better answers?
I think I kind of answered this in my session, but I would like to dive into it a little bit more. Because one, we do have really all of that, but you don't have to have necessarily your own knowledge graph or more advanced metadata. Like already with the just recommending content within Composer for related links and photo and video, you can see that kind of level of accuracy based on what we're doing with the metadata enhancements. But what we do or will offer with some of the kind of controls around Ask the News is less of like that metadata and knowledge graph approach, but controls of like how you want that to be leveraged. Like, should certain things be included, excluded? Maybe like kind of certain bias controls, like time filtering, content filtering, things like that. So you have a greater control over that data. And we haven't really ran into a lack of data there, even with video, which is kind of the hardest with maybe video doesn't have a lot of metadata, or maybe it doesn't even have any sound. We can still extract relevant information. But this is going to be great during the internal beta, is to validate that metadata is, performing how we want it to perform, to see if we do need to enhance that. But we can do that, and in partnership with our customers. But you don't necessarily have to prepare a lot coming into it.
Perfect. Thanks, Joey. Next question. Can you share a little bit about how feedback loops from customers or internal users influence the evolution of these products?
Oh, man. It's tough. Is like you may have an idea of really where a product's going or evolution of your own, or you're looking at what other people are doing, maybe competitors or even the large providers. But as I've already learned in a short time, even though it's been a couple of years with the new era of generative AI, is it's evolving rapidly on its own. And you have to kind of account for that. Like tomorrow, there could be a new optimized model specifically for RAGs developed from OpenAI that just blows away what we're doing now. But then we could fit that model in, and it unlocks new possibilities. But I look at it as, it's kind of an old Amazon saying is, it's focus on the customer, not the competitor. And for us, we have our customers, but our customers have customers. And this is going to be that one of those big times where that loop becomes kind of harmonious, where it's like, well, our readers are saying X, how can we do that? And I like to let that drive it a little bit, but more from like a kind of a pattern level rather than like singular solutions or singular kind of micro features, and be like, what's the larger thing we're trying to do here? Like, are the summaries too long? The experience isn't what they hope or whatever, and just kind of tweak and tweak. Because you can always make a good product better. You can't make a bad product good. So like, we just look at it that way, is to have a really good product out of the gate, and we can always make it better through that feedback loop.
I think broadly speaking, Joey, in the same way that we see the media industry need to go from an audience 1.0 model, where we were pushing content at our customers, to an audience 3.0 model, where it's co-collaborators and stakeholders, it's the same thing for my teams and our product strategy. We're not seeking to have all the best ideas in the world. We're seeking to have the strongest partnerships, the strongest dialogue with the people on this call, with our customers, with the Washington Post, so that we can build value together. So I think there's an interesting analogy there, where as a software organization, we're seeking to have that same two-way feedback, co-collaborator, co-innovator story. And you see that in events like this, in ARC Connect, in many conferences around the world, and in our webinars and beta programs. So I think, Julie, there's a lot we're doing to really get that two-way conversation going, so we can innovate in a way that really improves the businesses of media.
Perfect. Thank you. And I have one final question. I'm going to put the three of you on the spot a little bit, but in honor of Halloween being tomorrow, if you had to leave the audience with one valuable trick, maybe a lesson learned the hard way, or treat, so a surprising success that you've learned from these projects, what would it be?
Mike, you want to go first?
I think that the trick was one that when we were talking about recommendations, we had we've been talking with a couple of the current ARC customers, and the trick that apparently Facebook used back in the early days, which was that when you were reading a Facebook feed and you typed in a new comment on a post and hit submit, it showed up for you, and it made it look like everybody in the conversation was seeing that, but there's actually a multi-second, like 15 to 20-second lag in that before anyone else on the rest of the internet saw it. And one of the things that helped us with was understand with recommendations that like we can do a lot of the neat lifting locally in JavaScript on your machine. It used to be that people were like client or server, and we could actually do both. We could do client and edge and server logic. And if we could make that seamless, it actually lets you do some really neat customer experiences. So that was kind of the trick that we learned.
I'll say, thinking about this for a while. So on the kind of trick side, kind of related to personalization, whole throwback story is when we were building Clavis, which was a really old recommendation system from the Washington Post data science team. After months of testing different homegrown machine learning models, literally writing out calculus for cosine similarity on a whiteboard, we were testing it, and then we were coming up with A/B tests, and we're like, why don't we? It was like 3 stories. Bottom it was like post recommends, and it was like just recommendations. I was like, why don't we test 2 recommendations and 1 anti-recommendation? Basically being like, recommend a story that is kind of not personalized and is very opposite. Because if you're, it's like eating chicken for dinner every night, one day you're gonna be like, I don't want chicken anymore. And found that click-through rate was almost equal. It's people are looking for that difference. And what that learning was, I remember Sam saying, is we'd have to remember we're still smarter than the AI for some of these decisions. And I feel like the trick really is don't rely on AI too much. Certain things are fantastic, make certain things easier, but you're still making good product decisions that may not involve needing to really rely on AI. And the kind of treat side, if you haven't seen this somewhat new feature from Anthropic with Claude, it's called Claude Skills, which is a way of kind of creating these like automated workflows. Google around about it, look it up. And why I bring that up is, one, it's pretty cool, but it's very hard to implement. I'm sure they'll get that better. But really is kind of an example of what we have coming within the platform soon around our agentic apps, which is our new AI assistant to do certain automations that is much simpler to set up, but is kind of similar. So it was a great validation of like something we've been working on for months with the Creator Apps team and Content Intelligence. It's very similar with Claude. I mean, that can do some other things like computer use we're not going to do, but that solution is quite similar. But I look that up. That may be useful for you in maybe other ways in your life. So.
Yeah, I think, Julie, it's a great question. You know, with AI, a lot of people have had dreams over the last couple of years. And with Halloween here, I want to recognize many of us had nightmares as well. And so I think the trick I would say is I got burned by AI asking for a quote from a book I had recently read. And it gave me back a set of quotes, and they seemed spot on. I didn't actually go in and reread and find the page where that quote is. And as it turned out, AI had made it up. It had gone from someone else's summary. And so I got burned with that little, I was tricked by AI, I would say. But it kind of, it leads me to the treat that I think Joey is saying. And that's, there's so much space for us as leaders to apply great judgment in the stories we tell, great judgment in the teams we lead, great judgment in the technologies and products we design. And so I think that's been the treat, is to come together as a team and really use our judgment and wisdom in collaboration with AI that can have such great information for us, but it reinforces the role for us and the importance of having all of us working together as a community to make the most of AI and the most for our audiences. So that's my trick or treat for Halloween, Julie.
I love it. Thank you all. Thank you. Well, that wraps up our Q&A and our webinar for the day. Thank you all so much for joining. Make sure to keep an eye on your inbox for the on-demand recording, which will be available soon. And thank you all so much for joining today. We appreciate your time and questions, and we look forward to connecting at a future webinar or event. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.